The sky above New York shimmered like fractured glass, the holographic transmission blooming across every screen, every augmented lens, every neural implant on Earth. It wasn't a broadcast, it was an imposition, a veil draped over the planet's atmosphere by forces humanity had only glimpsed in grainy sensor data from the outer colonies. Counselor Veth Kahl's form materialized in the center of it all, tall, angular, his exoskeletal frame etched with the iridescent scars of a dozen enforced pieces, his voice translated into a dozen human tongues, but carrying the weight of unyielding chitin, echoed from Times Square to the depths of the Pacific trenches. "Species of Sol 3, Veth intoned, his multifaceted eyes gleaming with the cold precision of doctrine. The Galactic Council of Hierarchs extends its final decree. You have breached the veil of isolation without sanction. Your expansion into the void disrupts the ordained balance. Submit unconditionally. Cede your fleets, your habitats, your sovereign will to the Council's stewardship. Or face scheduled sterilization. Your worlds will be rendered inert, your lineage extinguished within 3 cycles of your primary star. This is Mercy's edge. Choose." The hologram lingered, Veth's gaze sweeping the globe as if he could see the panic rippling outward, commutes halting mid-stride, children frozen in schoolyards, leaders in bunkers clutching tablets with trembling hands. Then it faded, leaving only the faint afterimage of his emblem, a spiral of chained worlds. In the dim-lit xenolinguistics lab buried under Geneva, Dr. Arun Patel stared at the frozen frame on his console. The air thick with the hum of decryptors and the faint ozone tang of overheating circuits. His fingers, stained with ink from old notebooks, danced across the interface, peeling back layers of the message like skin from a wound. Arun's glasses slipped down his nose, fogged by the recycled air, but he didn't pause. The surface transmission was blunt, a hammer blow, but beneath it, encrypted in fractal patterns that mimicked stellar interference, lay the nuances, the Council's true calculus. "Partial mercy," he murmured to the empty room, his voice hoarse from hours of isolation. The clauses unspooled, disarmament of all orbital assets, cession of autonomy to a provisional overseer, integration into the hegemony's labor castes, 1 planetary cycle, Earth's year, to comply, or the sterilization escalated from scheduled to immediate. It wasn't annihilation outright, but a leash disguised as leniency. Arun leaned back, rubbing his temples, the idealism that had driven him to decode the first alien signals now curdling into dread. Coexistence was possible, he told himself, if they played the fractures right, the whispers of dissent among the lesser hierarchs he'd gleaned from intercepted chatter. But mercy, this was a cage, baited with the illusion of survival. He patched through to the secure line, his heart pounding against the rational facade. "Madam President, it's Patel. The message has depths. We have options, if we move carefully." President Elise Monroe's war room, carved into the Rockies' granite heart, thrummed with the low urgency of aids and flickering holomaps. The air recyclers couldn't mask the sweat of fear, and Elise felt it beading on her own brow as she paced the central dais. Her daughter, safe on Mars, or so the last ping assured, flashed in her mind, a sharp reminder of what stakes truly meant. But she couldn't let it show, not here, not with the weight of 8 billion souls pressing down. "Bring them in," she ordered, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. The summit assembled in holographic fragments, Admiral Lena Rios from her flagship in Geosync, her face a mask of salt and pepper resolve, etched by losses Aaron could only imagine. Dr. Patel from Geneva, still disheveled, a scatter of cabinet heads, their eyes hollow. Lena's projection sharpened first, her uniform crisp against the void beyond her viewport. "Madam President, this isn't negotiation. It's a kill order with paperwork." Elise nodded, sinking into her chair as the room sealed. "Lay it out, Admiral, all of it." Lena's eyes, sharp as targeting lasers, met hers. "Disarmament? We'd be gutting our defenses. The Council preaches balance, but their history's a ledger of exterminated disruptors. Once we're harmless, colonies stripped, fleets scrapped, they'll come for the rest. Resource audits, cultural purges. We've seen the vids from the fringe worlds. Species reduced to footnotes. Submission invites extermination on their timeline, not ours. The room murmured, but Aaron interjected, his voice cutting through like a scalpel. Not inevitably. The clauses allow for phased integration. If we stall, probe their divisions. Stall? Lena's laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. While they orbit our skies, we've bled for every kilometer of space we hold. My family. She trailed off, the old scar tightening her jaw, the skirmish that took her kin, early probes turned to ash. We kneel now, and Earth's just another compliant husk. Fight asymmetric, hit their supply lines, make submission cost more than it's worth. Elise listened, the political calculus warring with the strategist in her. Caution had kept her in office, balancing hawks and doves. But this? Pushing the decision to Lena felt like abdicating, yet owning the blood. She exhaled. We buy time, but no rash moves. Not yet. Half a world away, in the shadowed barracks of Lagos Forward Base, Sergeant Maya Okafor's comm buzzed against her thigh, jolting her from a fitful doze. The deployment order scrolled across her implant. Secure orbital elevators. Nairobi to Baikonur. Contain panic, enforce quarantine if riots escalate. Her squad, 8 souls she'd pulled through hell on Titan, stirred in their bunks, faces lit by the glow of personal feeds, replaying Veth's ultimatum. Maya swung her legs over the edge, boots hitting the ferrocrete with a thud that echoed her pulse. Obey, and she'd lock down the lifts, strand thousands clawing for off-world escape. But her brother Jamal, wrenching mechs on Luna, oblivious to the storm, his last message had begged for news, for her to keep the family flag flying, disobey, slip a shuttle north, and reach him before the chaos swallowed Luna whole. Her hand tightened on her rifle sling, the ghost of abandoned civilians from the Orion evac clawing at her chest. She'd left them then, orders be damned. But the screams haunted her. Loyalty to Lena, to the chain, or to blood. The order's timer ticked, wheels up in 30. Pack light, ghosts, she barked to her team, voice rough as gravel. Elevators first, family later. But doubt gnawed, a flaw she couldn't outrun. The demonstration came without warning, a lance of light spearing from the asteroid belt. Elise watched it unfold on the war room's primary feed, her breath catching as the refinery, a skeletal habitat she'd championed for its helium-3 yields, erupted in silent fire. Unmanned, they'd said, but the manifests lied. A dozen miners, holdouts from the outer rigs, vaporized in an instant, their faces scrolled in after-action reports, grinning in 0G, families back on Ceres. Elise's advocacy had funneled them there, a bid for economic edge. Now, ash. Veth's follow-up transmission crackled through, a reminder of precision. Non-compliance invites broader application. The cycle shortens. Lena's projection flickered with restrained fury. They're testing us, showing the knife before the cut. Elise turned away, bile rising, the cost already mounting, and they'd barely begun. In the quiet corridor outside the summit chamber, Arun cornered Elise, his steps hurried, voice low. Madam President, listen. The Council's not monolithic. My decodes show rifts. Species like the Vor who chafe under Veth's enforcers. Stall. Broadcast defiance without declaration. Seek envoys through back channels. We find the cracks. We widen them. Elise paused, her hand on the bulkhead, the weight of Monroe legacy pressing. And if they seal the cracks with our blood? Aaron's idealism was a balm, but his hesitation in crises, freezing when blades were out, mirrored her own caution. Still, it bought moral ground, a thread to cling to amid the slide. Across the Atlantic, in the shadowed bays of the USS Vanguard, Lena moved like a shadow among her black-budget crews. No hollows, no logs, just whispers and encrypted bursts. Prep the ghosts, she murmured to her ops chief, a grizzled vet with a prosthetic eye. Asymmetric retaliation, stealth drones seated in the belt, miners' rigs turned to wolf packs. Not open war, but teeth in the dark. Her flaw burned. Total war's embrace. Civilian tallies as mere numbers, but Earth's survival demanded it. Veth's certainty would break against human grit. Or so she told herself, ignoring the mirror of their ruthlessness. Elise stepped to the broadcast podium hours later, the world's eyes on her from redoubts and ruins alike. Her reflection in the polished steel showed lines deepened by the day. But her voice rang clear, amplified across the net. People of Earth, Luna, Mars, the Council demands our surrender. They threaten our extinction. We will not submit, not to chains, not to erasure, but we will not rush to slaughter. Humanity endures. We adapt. We stand together. The words hung, defiant yet veiled, a tightrope over the abyss. No open war, but no kneel. Cheers erupted in pockets, streets, bunkers, but Elise felt the hollowness. Jamal Okafor, watching from a lunar hab, punched the air, unaware his sister's shuttle had veered off course, chasing family over duty. Aboard the Council's enforcer vessel, drifting in the outer dark, Veth's mandibles clicked in rage. The human's broadcast, insolent, evasive, mocked the decree. His certainty, the unyielding pillar of his service, cracked just enough to admit fury. "Accelerate," he commanded his bridge crew, the lesser species flinching under his gaze. "Mobilize the punitive fleet. Sterilization commences in half a cycle. Let them taste the cost of defiance." Precedent could not stand. Human unpredictability was a virus. It had to be cauterized. Deep in Vanguard's core, Lena watched the same feed, her orders already cascading. The first strike plan, drones slipping toward Veth's Vanguard pickets, gained her nod in the gloom. No fanfare, just the grim calculus of survival. It would doom them all or carve a path, but hesitation was death. Her hand steadied on the console, the war-scarred resolve hardening. Humanity's ingenuity against the odds. Not bravado, but the quiet defiance of those who'd already lost everything worth keeping. Deep in Vanguard's core, Lena watched the same feed. Her orders already cascading. The first strike plan, drones slipping toward Veth's Vanguard pickets, gained her nod in the gloom. No fanfare, just the grim calculus of survival. It would doom them all or carve a path, but hesitation was death. Her hand steadied on the console, the war-scarred resolve hardening. Humanity's ingenuity against the odds. Not bravado, but the quiet defiance of those who'd already lost everything worth keeping. The alerts hit like a gut punch across the system. President Elise Monroe stood in the fortified command bunker beneath New Geneva, her fingers white-knuckled on the edge of the holotable. The relay station on Mars' outer rim, Phobos Relay, a spindly lattice of antennas and fusion cores, had been her daughter's last posting. Sophia, 23 and fresh from academy, manning comms for the civilian evac shuttles. "Mom, it's just relays," she'd joked in her last message, voice crackling over the lag. "Boring as hell, but someone's got to keep the lines open." Now the feed showed Veth's Vanguard slicing through the void like a scalpel through flesh. 3 jagged council cruisers, their hulls etched with the interlocking rings of the hierarchs, materialized from slipspace on the system's edge. No hails, no demands. Just a bloom of plasma lances that tore into the station's orbit. Elise's breath caught as the first volley struck, the relay's solar arrays crumpling like foil. Debris spun out in a glittering halo, silent screams in the vacuum. "Evac protocols," she barked, but the comms officer shook his head, sweat beading on his brow. "They're gone, Madam President. Jammers are up." Phobos is dark. Elise's vision blurred. Sophia's face flickered in her mind, laughing at a family holo, then pale and focused in that last transmission. The station housed 200 techs, civilians mostly, routing signals for the Mars colonies. Now they were ghosts, their pods venting atmosphere in the cold. Veth's ships pressed on, engines flaring as they burned toward the inner planets, a predator tasting blood. Elise sank into her chair, the weight of it all pressing down. She was the unbreakable one, the voice of unity, but this severed her at the root. No contact with her daughter, no confirmation of survival, just the hollow echo of annihilation. and the knowledge that Vethkal wouldn't stop until Earth knelt or burned. In the dim-lit war room aboard Vanguard, Lena Rios paced the circumference of the strategy deck, her boots thudding softly against the grated floor. The air hummed with the low throb of life support, laced with the faint ozone tang of overworked consoles. Around the central holotable, the War Council assembled, haggard faces from Fleet Command, Intel liaisons, and the civilian reps. President Monroe's hologram flickered in from Geneva, her eyes shadowed, but she nodded for Lena to proceed. Arun Patel sat to Lena's right, his fingers steepled, jaw tight. No one mentioned the relay strike. The wound was too fresh. Operation Ashes, Lena began, her voice steady as she keyed the projection. The holo bloomed, a sprawling council logistics hub orbiting a gas giant in the adjacent system, a bulbous fortress ringed by docking arms and swarms of supply drones. We've cracked their auxiliary codes from the skirmish at Proxima. Enough to spoof a resupply vector and slip a team inside. The hub feeds Veth's entire vanguard, fuel, munitions, replacement hulls for their auxilia fleets. We hijack it, overload the core, and detonate. Starve them mid-burn. Buys us weeks, maybe months, to fortify the inner defenses. The table fell silent as the sim ran, virtual explosions rippling through the hub, debris fields choking the invasion lanes. Then the cost overlay, millions of signatures in the auxiliary bays, coerced laborers from a dozen subjugated worlds pressed into service under council whips. Not soldiers, but fodder, haulers, techs, breeders for the war machine. Elise's hologram leaned forward, her composure a thin veneer. Millions, Admiral, entire populations. Lena met her gaze without flinching. They're not volunteers, Madam President. The Council's auxiliaries are chattel, species broken and bound. If we don't hit this, Veth overruns Sol in days. Your colonies, my ships, all of it gone. Her family flashed in her mind, the orbital strike that vaporized her parents' hab on Luna early in the probes. She'd sworn then, no more kneeling. But the faces in the sim twisted something in her gut. Acceptable losses, she told herself. The math demanded it. Arun shot to his feet, his chair scraping back. The xenologist's eyes burned behind his glasses, his usual measured tone cracking with fury. This isn't war, Lena, it's genocide. You're not starving a fleet, you're slaughtering the enslaved to get at their masters. Those millions, they're victims, same as us. Crack the code deeper, I've seen fractures in their hierarchy. Infiltrate, not destroy. Arm the auxiliaries, spark a mutiny from within. Turn their own chains against them. Lena crossed her arms, the hollows glow casting harsh shadows on her scarred cheek. Mutiny? On what timeline, Aaron? Veth's armada is inbound. We need results now, not your diplomatic dreams. She'd respected his decoding of the first ultimatums, his belief in cracks where she saw only iron, but his idealism had stalled too many ops before, hesitation that cost lives. Arun's hands trembled as he pulled up his own overlay, a web of intercepted chatter from subjugated worlds. Look, whispers of rebellion in the outer rims. The Kalari workers, the Vor breeders, they're not loyal, they're surviving. Give me a team, a week, and we plant the seeds. Coexistence isn't surrender, it's strategy, the council murmured, eyes flicking between them. Elise rubbed her temple, the relay's loss still raw. Admiral, Doctor, viable alternatives? Lena shook her head. His plan's a gamble without teeth. Ashes is certain. Arun's lack of specifics hung in the air like smoke, noble but toothless against the clock. The vote came swift. Ashes approved, with Arun's infiltration folded in as a secondary objective. But Lena knew the truth. Sabotage first, salvation second. Sergeant Maya Okafor's team drew the short straw, as always. In the dim prep bay of the stealth corvette, she ran final checks on her squad's exosuits. 8 operatives, hardened shadows from a dozen hells. Maya adjusted her visor, the HUD flickering with schematics of the hub. Her brother Jide's face lingered in a corner feed, him welding panels on a Luna dry dock. Stay frosty, sis, he'd messaged. She pushed it down. Focus was survival. Lena's orders came via encrypted burst. Priority 1. Disable failsafes on the core. No diversions. Auxiliaries are collateral. Get in. Rig the overload. Get out. Maya's jaw clenched. She'd abandoned civilians before, in the chaos of an evac gone wrong. Screams echoing as her shuttle pulled away. Never again, she'd vowed. But Lena's voice brooked no argument. "Understood, Admiral," Maya replied, though doubt coiled in her chest like a spring. Insertion was a nightmare from the jump. The Corvette ghosted through the outer patrols, but a council picket veered too close, sensors pinging their wake. Alarms wailed in the cockpit. "Interception in 30, the pilot hissed. Maya gripped her harness, calculating. Jettison the secondary squad. 4 fresh recruits, their pods rigged to drift silent into the black. By the primary's time to breach. "Do it," she ordered, voice flat. The hatches blew, pods tumbling free like discarded seeds. No chutes, no signals, just cold sleep and prayer. The picket swept past, oblivious, and Maya's shuttle punched toward the hub's underbelly. But the choice gnawed immediately. A acid burn. Those 4, kids really, families waiting on Earth. She'd hear the fallout later. Furious holocalls, accusations of callousness. Maya swallowed it down. The mission demanded blood. They docked in a maintenance crawl space, mag boots clamping to the hull. The hub thrummed around them, a living beast of conduits and bays. Maya's team sliced through an access hatch, exosuits humming as they ghosted into the service levels. Air recyclers whooshed overhead, carrying the metallic tang of alien sweat. No guards yet, just the endless labor of the damned. Then the nursery sector. Maya's HUD flagged it mid-corridor, a vast chamber pulsing with biolights, rows of incubation pods cradling juveniles. Not soldiers, workers in the making. Tiny forms, scaled and furred, tagged with relocation markers for Veth's fleet. Thousands wriggling in nutrient gels, destined for the grind. Maya's breath hitched. Her team's shadows fell across the transparisteel viewport. One operative, Reyes, froze. "Sarge, kids, this whole place—" "Focus," Maya snapped, but her voice wavered. Lena's sabotage would flood the core, chain react through every level. Those juveniles, vaporized before they drew breath. The failsafes blinked innocently ahead, a simple hack away. Rescue them, dozens maybe, but the alarm would doom the op. Her brother's face flashed again, Jide, safe on Luna, but for how long if Veth won? Maya keyed her comm, throat tight. "Command, we've got complications. Nursery sector active, reload tags for the Vanguard." Static, then Lena's voice clipped. "Acknowledge, proceed with disables." Clocks ticking. Back on Vanguard, Lena stared at the tactical feed. Maya's report, a knife twist. The war room felt smaller, Arun pacing like a caged animal. Veth's armada loomed on the outer scans, cruisers coalescing, auxilia swarms forming up. Hours, not days. The relay's destruction echoed in Elise's silence. Her hologram had gone dark after the vote. Grief, a private war. Arun slammed a fist on the table. "Lena, abort. Those are children, innocents. We become them if we pull this trigger. Mutiny's still viable. Maya's inside." "Viable?" Lena shot back, her calm fracturing. "Veth's at our door. Phobos is ash. Mars next. We abort, and it's over. Humanity's done." Her flaw stared back from the hollow, the readiness to burn it all, family ghosts whispering approval. But Arun's words clawed at her. Monsters, indistinguishable. She'd lost her parents to this calculus once. Now she'd wield it. The countdown ticked. 5 minutes to overload window. Elise's hologram flickered back, voice hoarse. "Admiral, my daughter's out there. If we—" Lena cut her off, hand hovering over the auth code. "We fight, Madam President, or we kneel." Arun's protests rose, a desperate litany, but she keyed the signal. "Maya, trigger it now." The chain reaction ignited like a starbirth gone wrong. Alarms screamed through the hub as the core overloaded, plasma blooms erupting in sequence. Maya's team bolted for exfil, the nursery's pods shattering in the shockwave. Tiny forms lost to the fire. Debris clouds bloomed across the system, snarling Veth's supply lines, forcing his vanguard to halt and regroup. Cheers Vethkal's command nexus thrummed with the low hum of holographic displays, each one flickering like a dying ember as reports flooded in from the outer rim. The hub's destruction hit the council channels first, a cascade of encrypted bursts that unraveled into stark visuals, twisted metal blooming into plasma fire, the nursery sector's containment fields failing in a symphony of screams that no one could hear across the void. He watched the playback loop, the juvenile pods cracking open like overripe fruit, their fragile forms spilling into the inferno. Not soldiers, not threats. Just the future of 3 client species reduced to ash by human hands. Veth's mandibles clicked softly, a habit from his youth, on the arid spires of Keith Prime, where every resource demanded calculation. He leaned forward in his restraint harness, the Nexus's dim blue lighting casting shadows across his chitinous exoskeleton. The hesitant ones, those soft-shelled diplomats from the Verdant Accord, would balk at this. They always did, preaching equilibrium over enforcement. But this was the proof he'd needed. "Transmit to all hierarchs," he rasped, his voice modulator translating the guttural clicks into the galaxy's lingua franca. "The humans have struck at our core, not military assets, our young, savages who breed war in their marrow. If we falter now, the chaos spreads. Full extermination decree, authorize it." No more delays. The acknowledgments rolled in, a reluctant chorus. The Accord's envoy hesitated longest, its fronds quivering in the holofeed. "Enforcer Kal, the optics..." "Optics shatter like those pods," Veth cut in, his compound eyes narrowing. "Submit or die was our offer. They chose death for all. Rally your fleets or watch your own nests burn next." By the time the decree sealed, the Nexus buzzed with renewed purpose. Veth's vanguard, snarled in debris, would regroup soon. Earth awaited, a pale blue target ripe for the cracking. On Earth, the leaked footage hit like a kinetic strike. Maya Okafor stared at the public feed from her bunk in the Geneva underbarracks, the grainy vid looping on her wristpad, her team's shadows darting through the hub's corridors, charges blooming in the nursery's glow. The juveniles, pale, writhing things, didn't look like threats. They looked vulnerable. The anchor's voice droned over the chaos. "Directorate complicity confirmed. War criminals in our ranks." Riots ignited in the sprawl of New Lagos and the arcologies of Beijing, crowds surging against cordons, chants of "no more blood," clashing with counter-protests screaming for vengeance. Maya's surviving squad, Rico with his bandaged stump where his left arm used to be, and Lena's ghost of a tech specialist. Kira huddled in the dim rec room, the air thick with recycled sweat and unspoken blame. "It's us they're naming," Rico muttered, nursing a synth coffee that tasted like regret. His eyes, usually sharp with that street hustle glint, were dull now. "Okafor's butchers, like we had a choice." Maya's jaw tightened, the scar along her cheek pulling taut. She could still feel the hub's deck vibrating under her boots, the exfil shuttle's engines roaring as they punched out. "We hit the supply lines, saved months of siege. But yeah, tell that to the families back home watching their kids' schools get torched in retaliation." Kira slammed her pad down, the clatter echoing. "Factions are splintering the Directorate, pacifists calling for surrender, hardliners baying for alien heads. We're the scapegoats either way." Maya stood, the weight of her gear vest pressing like an accusation. Loyalty to Lena had gotten them this far, ingenuity against the odds, a squad that turned scraps into strikes. But now, public trust fractured and her brother's face flashed in her mind, him wrenching on lunar rigs, oblivious to the storm. She couldn't let this break them, not yet. President Elise Monroe's office in the Toronto Citadel overlooked the fractured skyline, rain lashing the reinforced panes like accusations. She paced the length of the room, her heels clicking on the polished ferrocrete, while Admiral Lena Rios stood at parade rest by the desk, unyielding, her uniform crisp despite the shadows under her eyes. "You bypassed oversight," Elise said, her voice low but edged with the steel that had won her the election. "That hub strike, nursery included. Civilian command wasn't looped. Now the world's burning and your op's the match." Lena's gaze didn't waver, but her fingers flexed at her sides, the only tell. "Ma'am, the intel was time-sensitive. Veth's supply hub crippled their advance by weeks. We bought breathing room." "Breathing room for riots, for accusations of genocide?" Elise stopped. Facing her, the president's daughter, safe, or so she'd thought, on Mars, her messages a lifeline in this madness. But now a fragmentary ping from the red planet's relays. Garbled static, a distress beacon from the dome cluster. "Attack confirmed, casualties mounting." Elise's chest tightened, the world narrowing to that echo. Her girl, laughing over holocalls, promising to visit when the skies cleared. Gone? She sank into her chair, the leather creaking under her. Lena watched, silent, the veteran's face scarred by losses Elise could only imagine. Family vaporized in the first skirmishes. But this? Elise's hand trembled as she pulled up the emergency protocols. Political caution had kept her from the brink before, pushing the ugly calls to men like Rios. No more. "Sign it," she whispered, authorizing the wartime decree. Near dictatorial powers to Lena. Full operational autonomy, resource overrides, no vetoes. The seal clicked into place, a death knell for restraint. Elise met Lena's eyes, the cost settling like ash. "End this, whatever it takes." Lena nodded once, turning for the door, but as it hissed shut, Elise's calm buzzed again. Another fragment from Mars. Hope or confirmation? She couldn't breathe. Dr. Aaron Patel's reassignment came via a curt memo shunted from the War Council's polished chambers to a dimly lit signals bunker buried under the Rockies. The air hummed with server fans, the walls lined with decryption rigs that smelled of ozone and neglect. No windows, just the glow of screens painting his face in sickly green. "Ethical concerns," the note read, "reallocate to support roles." Arun's hands shook as he unpacked his kit. The idealism that had driven him to decode the Council's first ultimatum, now a bitter weight. He'd argued for dialogue, for cracks in their hegemony, coexistence over annihilation, but Lena's strike had silenced him, the Council seeing his hesitation as weakness. He settled at a console, routing intercepted traffic through filters, Council dissent channels buried in the noise, whispers from fringe species, doubts about Veth's zeal. Arun's fingers flew, algorithms peeling back layers, a verdant accord fragment. Kaal's decree overreaches. Human unpredictability demands study, not erasure. Another from a neutral enclave. Juvenile losses fracture alliances. Recall the enforcer. Proof, not unanimous. Arun leaned back, pulse racing. If he could surface this, show the fractures, maybe sway Elise or even leak it to fracture Veth's rally. But secrecy now, his flaw, that indecision, had cost him the table. Underestimating ruthlessness had landed him here. He patched a secure line to an old contact, the first thread in a web of his own making. Maya's squad dropped from the stealth runner into the border skirmishes chaos, the void alive with laser fire and the guttural roars of Council interceptors. Their target? A Keth cruiser limping from a faint strike, rumored to carry a mid-rank officer with Veth's ops codes. Boarding pods latched with a shutter, mag boots clamping as they breached the hull. "Flank left, Rico. Cover the corridor," Maya barked into her comm, her pulse rifle humming hot. The air recyclers wheezed alien scents, acrid like burnt resin. Her team moved like shadows, Kira hacking a bulkhead, Rico laying suppressive fire. But the cruiser fought dirty, automated turrets swiveling, drones swarming like angry wasps. They hit the bridge deck amid screams, Council crew in exosuits, claws slashing. Maya dropped two, her shots precise, but a blast caught Rico square, hurling him against a console. Blood bloomed from his suit, his gasp crackling over the link. "Sarge, go for the officer." The primary target, a lithe Vorth commander, scrambling for an evac pod, data slate in grip. Capture him, and Lena's intel net widens. But Rico's vitals flatlined in her HUD, his hand clawing toward her. Haunted by evac ghosts, by civilians left to flames, Maya couldn't abandon another. She pivoted, hauling Rico over her shoulder, firing blind to cover their retreat. "Kira, smoke 'em! We're bugging out!" The Vorth slipped away in the haze, pod launching clean. Mission compromised, half the squad limping back to the runner, no prize but wounds and what-ifs. Maya's breath ragged, she patched Rico's bleed, his weak grin a knife. Chose wrong? Chose us, she growled, the cost etching deeper. Disobedience's shadow loomed, but her brother's face steadied her. Not today. Lena Rios's war room in the orbital bastion was a hive of tack hollows and strained faces. The captured Vorth officer, lesser rank, but talkative under truth serum drip, slumped in restraints. Maya's report had come in bitter. Target lost, but this one spilled enough. Lena loomed over the interrogation feed, her voice a whip. The planet cracker, details. The Vorth's multifaceted eyes darted, its translator stuttering. Enforcer call, authority granted. If resistance holds, deploys from Vanguard. Glass a world in hours. Earth next, not threat, certainty. The room fell silent, extinction shifting from galactic bluff to tactical clock. Lena's mind raced, the weight of Elise's decree pressing, her flaw, embracing total war, civilian losses as acceptable, had carried them here. But now, family ghosts whispered doubt, the line between defender and destroyer blurring. She turned to her staff. Regroup intel. We counter or we burn. Arun's bunker felt smaller as the intercepts piled up. Veth's fleet signatures massing on the rim. He burst into Lena's brief hours later, data slate clutched like a shield. Admiral, wait, the descent. It's real. Verdant pulling back, enclaves fracturing. We expose this, buy time without... Lena cut him off, her eyes hard. Time's the crackers fuse, Doctor. We need more than whispers. She activated the secure vault feed. Project Medusa, Earthside Black Site, a relic from pre-contact doomsday vaults. Wormhole tech, twisted to stellar sabotage. Seed a cascade in the Armada's path, erase them in gravitational fire. But the Sims warned, ripples could destabilize Sol's core, collapses chaining out. Billions at risk, humanity's own hand on the trigger. Arun paled. That's forbidden for a reason. It dooms us all, morally, physically. There has to be another way. Lena's voice steadied, defiance earned in blood. Their way is erasure. Ours is survival. Activate prep sequences. As text scrambled, Arun's objections echoed unanswered. Lena Rios gripped the armrests of the shuttle's crash seat as it burrowed into the asteroid's jagged maw, the hull groaning under the strain of magnetic clamps locking them in place. The Medusa installation was a ghost in the void, carved from a nameless rock tumbling through the outer fringes of Sol's heliopause. No fanfare, no welcoming committee, just the cold bite of recycled air and the distant hum of fusion drives spooling up. She unstrapped, her boots magnetizing to the deck with a faint click, and shouldered her kit bag. The engineers were waiting in the central ops chamber, their faces gaunt under the harsh LED strips, eyes shadowed by weeks of isolation. "Admiral," said the lead tech, a wiry woman named Hale, with grease-streaked coveralls extending a tablet. "Site's secure, but we need to talk parameters before you settle in." Lena nodded, scanning the schematics as they walked the dimly lit corridor. Medusa wasn't a weapon. It was a reconfiguration of reality itself, a gravitic lens meant to twist stellar plasma into a lance that could gut a fleet from light minutes away. Hidden here, in this hollowed-out tomb of stone and steel, it had slumbered since the first alien probes sniffed too close to Earth. Now, with Veth's armada bearing down, it was humanity's last spiteful card. Hale tapped the display, zooming on the firing arc. Proximity to Sol is the issue. We're close enough for the focus array to draw from the corona, but the feedback loop, it could ripple back, destabilize the outer layers over centuries. solar flares spiking, maybe even a premature red giant phase, if we're unlucky. Billions on the inner worlds, Earth, Mars, they'd feel it first. Habitats failing, comms, blackouts, crop failures turning to famines. Lena's jaw tightened, the weight of it settling like shrapnel in her gut. She'd lost her family to the Council's early probes, glassed colonies where surrender wasn't an option. But this? Weaponizing the sun itself, dooming generations to a slow roast. It was the kind of calculus the aliens thrived on. Total war without mercy. Options? None clean, Hale said flatly. We pull back to the Ort, lose the element of surprise. Veth's scouts are already pinging the belt. Or we fire and pray the models are wrong. Engineers built this for desperation, Admiral, not precision. Lena handed back the tablet, her voice steady despite the churn in her chest. Prep the array. We'll fire if it comes to it. She didn't say the rest. That hesitation had killed more humans than any alien beam. As Hale peeled off toward the core, Lena entered the command blister. See the asteroid's false gravity fading to a subtle pull. Screens flickered to life around her, showing the fleet dispositions. Veth's cruisers forming a noose around Seoul, human pickets harried and bleeding. Earned defiance, she thought. That's all they had left. Across the system, in the fortified bunkers beneath Geneva's shattered dome, President Elise Monroe stared at the authorization form, her hand trembling over the stylus. The room smelled of stale coffee and ozone from overloaded servers, aides hovering like ghosts in the dim light. Her daughter, presumed vaporized in the Mars strike, no wreckage, no bodies, haunted every breath. The official word was lost with all hands, but Elise knew better. The Council's precision strikes left nothing to bury. Grief clawed at her, raw and unrelenting, but she shoved it down. Humanity needed a leader, not a mother unraveling. The Medusa brief lay open before her, its implications a poison in her veins. Activate it and they might shatter Veth's fleet, refuse, and Earth knelt or burned. She signed, the stylus scratching like a death knell, then looked up at her chief of staff. Include a failsafe. Link it to my auth codes. If Veth blinks, if there's any channel for negotiation, we stand down. No automated triggers. The aide nodded, but his eyes held doubt. Madam President, the Admiral... We'll follow orders, Elise cut in, her voice cracking just enough to betray the fracture inside. She rose, smoothing her suit as if it could hide the hollowness. Political caution had kept her in power, balancing hawks like Lena against doves like Aaron. But owning this? Authorizing a sun killer while Luna's habitats flickered under skirmisher fire, it would stain her legacy black. She feared the history vids more than the aliens, being the one who chose genocide to save her own. Yet, as the form transmitted, a grim resolve settled. For her daughter, if nothing else, Earth wouldn't kneel. In the flickering glow of his decryption rig, deep in a black site vault orbiting Titan, Dr. Aaron Patel watched the intercepted chatter scroll like blood in water. The Council's encryption was a labyrinth of quantum weaves, but he'd cracked it weeks ago, piecing together fragments from Veth's command net. Now, as techs scrambled around him, his earlier objections to firing Medusa without exhausting diplomacy hung unanswered in the air. Neutrality had given way to urgency. The fleet was closing by and silence from the aliens meant escalation. A new burst lit the screen. Dissent from the fringes. A minority bloc, species from the outer spirals, bound to the Council by fear more than loyalty, horrified by Veth's extermination edict. Unchecked purge risks cascade rebellion, one fragment read from a avian-like envoy. Humans exhibit adaptive resilience. Submission or annihilation invites mimicry across client worlds. Arun's pulse quickened, cracks. Real ones, not wishful thinking. He leaned back, rubbing his temples, the flaw of his indecision gnawing. Idealism had kept him from the front lines, decoding transmissions while soldiers died, but underestimating ruthlessness. That had cost colleagues in the first Contact Hub massacre. Veth's certainty blinded him to this. Human unpredictability now mirrored in his own coalition. Arun formulated the plan swiftly, risky as threading a needle in a storm. Mid-battle, hijack the Council's open frex. Broadcast the hub's atrocities, the vaporized envoys, the glassed outposts. Not just to Veth, but to those wavering species. Show the hypocrisy, fracture the block before Medusa lit the void. Route this to the Admiral and President, he said to the nearest tech, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. And prep the viral packet. If we time it right, we don't need to burn the sun to win. But doubt lingered. His plans demanded perfect execution, and war rarely obliged the hesitant. Sergeant Maya Okafor crouched in the stealth frigate's ventral bay, her team arrayed around the Medusa control shard, a matte black obelisk humming with contained fury. The shard was the weapon's brain, a quantum-locked core that had to be slotted into the array at point-blank range, piercing Veth's formation like a dagger to the heart. Her squad, 5 hardened ops, faces scarred from lunar raids and orbital drops, eyed the crate with the wariness of handling live ordnance. Camaraderie bound them tighter than blood. They'd pulled each other from wrecks, shared rations under fire. But Maya's thoughts drifted to her brother Thomas, welding frames on Luna's docks, oblivious to the storm breaking. "Escort protocol," she barked, voice low over the frigate's deck vibrations. "We dock the shard, sink it, and extract. No heroics. Veth's got eyes everywhere. Grav sniffer drones, phase cloaks. One slip, and we're plasma." Private Reyes, her second, nodded, checking his mag rifle's charge. Heard the op brief. "Frigate ghosts in, we ride the wave." "But if they spot us mid-pierce?" "Then we improvise," Maya said, the words tasting like ash. Her flaw burned. Loyalty to her people, pushing her to disobey if it saved skin. The hub evacuation haunted her. Civilians left screaming as shuttles fled. Not again, but orders were iron. Diverting for Luna meant dooming the timing, the whole damn play. The frigate shuddered as it slipped from Saturn's shadow, engines whispering on minimal thrust. Alarms pinged softly, council skirmishers probing the outer lanes. Maya's comms crackled then, a private burst from Luna, Thomas's voice ragged with panic. "Maya, it's bad. Skirmishers hit the habs. Depressurization in Sector 7. They're glassing the docks. I can't get to the evac pods. Sis, please." Her hand froze on the console, heart slamming like a breaching charge. The team glanced her way, sensing the shift. Divert, punch through to Luna, buy time for civilians. It would scatter the frigate's approach, give Veth's net time to tighten. Medusa's window, minutes, not hours, would slam shut. She clenched her jaw, tasting copper from bitten lip. "Hold position," she transmitted back, voice breaking. "Thomas, seal your suit. Evac's inbound. I can't come." The lie burned. She couldn't, not without dooming the rest. Irrational choice clawed at her, family over fleet, but she shoved it down. For humanity, she'd abandon one more. Aboard the Council's flagship, the Hierarch's blade, Veth Kal's tendrils flexed against the command throne, his multifaceted eyes narrowing at the sensor wash. The bridge thrummed with the low chant of subordinate species, but his focus locked on the gravitic anomalies blooming from the asteroid belt, subtle warps, like a predator coiling in the dark. Civilization ending, he recognized the signature from suppressed archives. A stellar manipulator, crude but potent. Humans defiant to the last, building doomsday toys while their worlds crumbled. "Amplify scans," he rasped, his voice a layered hiss through the translator. Ideological certainty armored him. The Council maintained order through excision, preventing chaos from unstable upstarts like these primates. But fear gnawed. A precedent of resistance could unravel it all. Client worlds rising in echo, no. Submission or erasure. He keyed the broadcast array, his image projecting across open channels to Earth's remnants. "Humanity, this is Counselor Veth Kal. Anomalies detected. Cease your barbarism or face total excision. Unconditional surrender now, or Saul joins the purged." The words were final, a demand laced with the weight of empires. Covertly, his secondary tendril armed the planet cracker, a relativistic slug primed for Luna's core, payback for their insolence. Let them choose kneel or watch their moon shatter. In Geneva's bunker, Elise's private channel flared to life. Lena's face grim from the asteroid, Arun's tense from Titan. Luna's feed screamed in the background, skirmishers raking habitats, fires blooming in the vacuum. Vote, Elise said, her voice steel over the shatter inside. Medusa now, conventional holdout, or surrender to save the sun, and those billions of bystanders in the outer rims. Lena's eyes hardened. Activate, Veth won't negotiate, he's arming killers. Arun leaned in, urgency cracking his calm. Wait, I've got the broadcast ready, fracture them first. Elise weighed it, the cost of each path a blade. Surrender preserved nothing but chains, holdout bled them dry. Medusa. It was annihilation's mirror, preemptive and merciless. But with Luna under fire, the fleet closing like jaws, she nodded. Proceed to activation. Lena, prime it. Aaron, you get one window. Broadcast mid-approach. Fracture. The Elise's words hung in the command nexus like a verdict, the hollow screens flickering with the inexorable advance of the Council Armada. Fracture the bastards, she finished, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The line to Arun cut, leaving only the hum of strained systems and the distant thunder of impacts on Luna's shields. Down in the auxiliary bays of the UED Vanguard, Dr. Arun Patel moved like a man possessed, his lab coat discarded somewhere in the corridors he'd sprinted through. Reassignment be damned. His orders from the science directorate had been to bunker down and analyze debris patterns, but that was before Elise's green light. The obsolete deep-range transmitter loomed in the dim-lit chamber, a relic from the pre-hegemony wars, its coils scarred and dusty. Arun's fingers flew over the access panel, overriding locks with a jury-rigged decryptor he'd built from spare parts. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The air recyclers wheezed, pulling double duty against the station's failing power grid. He slotted in the data crystal, the uncensored footage from the hub massacre blooming across his interface. Twisted metal, silent screams frozen in vacuum. The sterilization doctrine's cold script, scrolling like a death warrant. Veth's own words, pulled from intercepted comms. Unstable elements must be cauterized for the greater harmony. Arun patched it into the broadcast array, hijacking the emergency band that pierced Council encryption. His heart hammered. This wasn't science. It was a grenade lobbed into the heart of their empire. But coexistence started with truth, didn't it? Or so he told himself as he hit transmit, the signal surging out in a wide arc toward the enemy fleet. The wave hit like a shock front. On the bridge of the hierarchy enforcer, vigilant oath, Veth Kal's spines bristled under his armored cowl. Alarms wailed as subordinate vessels, those fragile alliances of the lesser species, faltered in formation. Cathari frigates veered, their captains' voices crackling over open channels in fragmented pleas. The footage, it's real. The hub, the doctrine, we can't. A Syrian cruiser powered down weapons, drifting out of attack vector, its crew's hesitation a ripple turning to a wave. Veth's claws tightened on his console, ideological certainty burning away, doubt. Precedent. That's what this was, a crack in the edifice that could topple everything. He activated the execution protocol without pause, his transmission blasting fleet-wide. Captains of the auxiliary wings, your oaths bind you to harmony. Defection invites chaos. On the main viewer, the first mutineer appeared, a Cathari commander bound in his own brig, eyes wide with terror. Veth's override fired the bridge plasma vents remotely, the feed capturing the bloom of superheated gas, and the captain's final, gurgling broadcast. One by one, the disloyal fell, executions live and merciless, bodies venting into the void. But it wasn't enough. The hesitant ships scattered, some firing wildly in panic. Veth snarled the order. Loyal vessels, purge the defectors. No quarter for those who fracture the whole. Plasma lances and kinetic swarms ignited the space between fleets, turning the void into a slaughterhouse. Allied hulls shattered against each other, debris fields blooming like bloody flowers. A Syrian destroyer rammed its own line, its crew choosing suicide over submission. Veth watched it all, unblinking, the cost a necessary excision. Humanity's poison spread too fast. This was the cure. Amid the chaos, Sergeant Maya Okafor's frigate, Shadow Lance, slipped through the fray, engines throttled to a whisper under the jamming haze. The insertion point for the Medusa control shard loomed, a jagged asteroid in the outer belt, its surface pocked with human defenses. Maya's squad huddled in the drop bay, mag boots locked, weapons hot. She gripped the harness, eyes on the tactical overlay, council pickets swarming like hornets drawn by the broadcast's fallout. "Captain Reyes," she barked into her comm, voice rough from recycled air. "You take the gunship wide, draw their fire. We'll punch through on your shadow." Reyes's face flickered on her HUD, the longtime friend from a dozen Black Ops, his grin forced under the strain. "Copy that, Okafor. Just don't make me regret buying you that drink on Titan." His gunship detached with a shudder, thrusters flaring as it broke cover, broadcasting dummy signals to mimic a fleeing auxiliary. Plasma fire erupted immediately, Council corvettes pivoting to target the bait. Reyes wove through the storm, his voice steady on the line. "They're biting. Go, Maya, get your asses in." A lance grazed his wing, shearing armor. He jinked hard, drawing a full squadron away from the asteroid's approach vector. Maya's frigate lurched forward, boarding torpedoes launching in a tight salvo. "For Reyes," she muttered, slamming the override to accelerate. The HUD showed his gunship crumpling under concentrated fire, a final burst of comm static. "Worth it. Tell my sister." Then silence, the escort sacrificed to buy them seconds. Maya's jaw clenched, the old ghost of abandoned civilians twisting in her gut. Not again. She wouldn't lose her team to hesitation. The torpedoes struck home, breaching the asteroid's crust with muffled booms. In the war room of the UED Endurance, President Elise Monroe stared at the live feeds, the purge unfolding in merciless detail. Alien crews, faces distorted by translation overlays, begged as their own ships turned on them, plasma blooms erasing entire decks. Arun's broadcast had cracked the facade, but Veth's response welded it shut tighter, loyalists firing with renewed zeal. Elise's attempt at a moral crisis had backfired, the slaughter justifying every hard line Lena had drawn. Total war wasn't a choice anymore. It was the only path left. She rubbed her temples, the image of her daughter on Mars flickering in her mind. Safe, for now, in a bunker that wouldn't hold against a planet cracker. Lena's voice cut through the static. "Madame President, the chaos is our window. Medusa's priming, but we're taking borders." Elise nodded to the empty air. Her political caution fracturing, pushing decisions downward had bought time, but no more. Veth's loyalists were hardened now, their fire more precise, Luna's shields cracking under the barrage. Lena was right, mercy had invited this. Deep in the Medusa asteroid's core tunnels, Admiral Lena Rios shouldered her pulse rifle, the Marine detachment fanning out behind her. The control shard hummed in its vault, energy coils glowing as the weapon primed. Alarms blared. Boarding torpedoes had punched through the outer layers, Council saboteurs spilling into the corridors like vermin. Lena's team moved in tight formation, flashlights cutting the dust-choked air. She led point, her veteran's instincts sharp despite the ache in her rebuilt knee from old skirmishes. Footsteps echoed ahead, inhuman, clawed. The first saboteur rounded the bend. A wiry Cathari with plasma cutter in hand, eyes wild. Lena fired without hesitation, the pulse bolt vaporizing its chest. But more came, desperate and cornered. One lunged from a side vent, tackling a Marine and slashing with vibro claws. Lena pivoted, rifle barking, but it was the last one that froze her. A lone infiltrator, disarmed, scrambling back against the bulkhead. It chittered in its tongue, the words half familiar from Arun's crash courses. "Mercy, harmony, please." Begging, just like the humans at the hub. Lena's finger tightened, memories of her family's shuttle exploding in the void, flashing hot. No kneeling, no mercy for those who demanded it. She pulled the trigger, the body slumping in a spray of ichor. The Marine beside her nodded grimly, but Lena felt the hollowness settle deeper. Indistinguishable now, weren't they? On the vigilant oath, Veth monitored the spin-up, the planet cracker's colossal form detaching from its carrier. The weapon's core whirred to life, gravitational fields coiling for the jump to Earth. Partial detonation would scour the system. Atmospheres ignited, orbits shattered, a gamble, but one that forced submission. His transmission pierced the human channels directly to Elise, voice like grinding stone. President Monroe, your defiance ends here. Deactivate Medusa, and I spare a remnant. Epsilon Eridani awaits, your seed preserved under council guidance. Refuse, and the cradle burns. Elise's feed showed her face, pale but resolute, the feeds of the ongoing purge scrolling behind her. Time crushed in, Medusa's sequence ticking up, the cracker's trajectory locking, except, and doom billions for a hidden colony's slim hope, her daughter among the survivors, perhaps, but humanity's fire dimmed to embers. Reject, and fire the mirror of annihilation, wiping the armada and its reluctant auxiliaries from existence. The moral core she'd clung to splintered. Survival demanded the monstrous. Veth waited, spines taut, but Elise's eyes hardened. No bargain, Kal. We don't kneel. The line went dead, her authorization beaming to Lena, final, irrevocable. Medusa's coils surged, the firing sequence racing against the cracker's inexorable charge toward Earth. In the void, the slaughter raged on, humanity's defiance a blade turned inward and out. Sergeant Maya Okafor gripped the frigate's shuddering bulkhead, her gloved fingers slick with coolant and blood from a gash she couldn't feel anymore. The Medusa control shard hummed in her other hand, its crystalline edges biting into her palm like a promise of finality. Alarms wailed through the dying corridors of the UNS Vanguard, red strobes painting her squad's ghosts in hellish light. Jenkins was gone, vented to space in the last breach. Ruiz lay slumped against a console, his chest a ruin from shrapnel, whispering her name like a prayer she couldn't answer. "Shards in," she muttered into her comm, voice steady despite the fire in her lungs. The planet cracker loomed on the tactical overlay, its charge bars ticking toward redline, minutes from unleashing hell on Earth. Maya's team had punched through the Council's picket to board this relic, a gutted human frigate the enemy had repurposed as a decoy. But the core was fried, FTL drives slagged, and the only way to lock Medusa's targeting was manual override, right here in the heart of the machine. "Sergeant, evac shuttles docking in 60, Lena's voice crackled over the link, tight with the strain of command. "You link it and get out. That's an order." Maya's jaw clenched. She thought of her brother on Luna, wrenching at some dockside repair bay, oblivious to the shadow racing toward Sol. Thought of the civilians she'd left screaming in that orbital evac years ago, her boots pounding away on orders that tasted like ash. Not again, not when this could end it. "Negative, Admiral, core's unstable. If I bail, the solution drifts. Medusa misses the cracker by a hair, and we're all glassed." She slotted the shard into the interface, sparks flying as it mated with the damaged relays. The ship groaned, gravity fluctuating like a dying breath. "Stabilizing now, it'll hold." A pause, heavy as vacuum. Then, "Maya, save it. Tell my brother. Tell him I fixed the damn engine one last time." She patched in the firing protocols, her fingers dancing over the haptic board. The frigate's core whined to life, feeding data back to the hidden Medusa array. Rescue? That shuttle would be vapor if she left this uncalibrated. No hope of it now. Just the pulse building, a gravitic storm waiting to break. The link went silent. Maya leaned back, staring at the readouts. Her team's bodies cooled around her, the air thick with ozone and regret. She sealed the hatch, overriding the evac protocols. The cracker's charge hit 90%. Close enough. Admiral Lena Rios watched the tactical holotank flicker, Maya's icon pulsing steady amid the chaos. The bridge of the UNS Reliant was a tomb of flickering screens and exhausted faces, her officers hunched, eyes hollow from days of attritional fire. The Council fleet swarmed like locusts, Veth's armada closing the noose around Sol's outer defenses. The planet cracker, that monstrous spearhead, barreled inbound, its silhouette a black scar against the stars. Elise's authorization burned in Lena's queue. Final, irrevocable. Medusa was green, but Maya's words echoed, a knife twist in her gut. The girl was staying. sacrificing for a shot that might not even clean the board. Lena's hand hovered over the command node. She saw her family's faces again, vaporized in the first skirmish, a lesson from the Council's enforcers. Earth wouldn't kneel. But this? Medusa's pulse wasn't surgical. It would rip through Veth's ships, yes, the cracker first, then the Armada in a chain reaction of warped space. But the fallout. Arun's defectors, those fragile alliances he'd brokered with mutinous fringes of the hegemony. Their systems, clustered too close in the Perseus arm, would buckle under the gravitic backlash. Inhabited worlds, billions of souls who dared to question the Council's yoke. Warped orbits, shattered FTL lanes, stars destabilized for generations. Her flaw stared back from the holotank, the cold calculus that let her sleep after orbital strikes on enemy civies. Acceptable losses, but this felt like crossing a line etched in her own blood. Still, hesitation meant extinction. Humanity's ingenuity against the odds, hijacking alien tech, turning their own weapons inward, earned defiance, bought with lives like Maya's. "Fire Medusa," Lena said, voice flat as she keyed the command. The array's coils, hidden in the asteroid belts, surged to life. No turning back. Dr. Arun Patel's lab aboard the Reliant was a frenzy of jury-rigged consoles and flickering data streams. Sweat stung his eyes as he slammed overrides into the targeting matrix, fingers blurring over the inputs. Medusa's beam was a blunt instrument, a concentrated gravitic lance meant to crumple fleets, not spare the innocent. But those defectors, the Clethari enclaves, the Voron refugees who'd heeded his transmissions, peeling away from Veth's iron grip. Their ships huddled in the shadow of the Armada, hoping for a miracle. "Arun, it's locked." Lena's voice cut through his calm, urgent but unyielding. "Pulse in 30. "I can narrow it," he barked, pulling up the beam's diffraction parameters. His mind raced, equations he'd scrawled in the dead of night, dreaming of coexistence. The Council's first message had been a crack, not unity but subjugation. He'd believed diplomacy could widen it. Now, this was annihilation dressed as salvation. His indecision had delayed warnings to those fringes. Now he fought to salvage what he could. He shunted power to the focusing rings, tweaking the pulse's coherence. Partial success at best. The beam would shear tighter, sparing maybe a cluster of the mutineers, but the rest, doomed to the warp. Billions twisted into the void because he couldn't act sooner, couldn't convince Lena that mercy wasn't weakness. 10 seconds, the AI intoned. Arun's hands shook as he hit execute. It's as tight as I can get. God, Lena." The pulse ignited. The detonation bloomed silent and savage across the void. From the Reliance bridge, Lena saw it first as a ripple in the stars, a gravitational scream that bent light into halos. The planet cracker shattered mid-charge, its core imploding in a cascade of fractured hulls and escaping plasma. Veth's Armada followed, dreadnoughts crumpling like foil, fighter swarms spiraling into each other as space folded. The pulse lanced through, an invisible scythe, obliterating the bulk in seconds. Shockwaves propagated outward, FTL lanes fracturing like glass under a hammer. In a vast radius, dozens of light years, the hegemony's webwork collapsed. No more reinforcements, no cohesive strike. The Council, that ancient monolith, bled out in the dark. Lena exhaled, the bridge erupting in ragged cheers that died quick. Maya's icon winked out. The frigate was gone, consumed in the backlash. President Elise Monroe stood before the global broadcast array in the fortified bunkers beneath Geneva, her face composed as the cameras rolled, the feed patched through to every habitat, every ship, every soul in Sol. Behind her, aides monitored the incoming data. Medusa's triumph, the Armada's ruin. Victory, but the cost. "Ladies and gentlemen of Earth," she began, voice steady, drawing on the charisma that had won elections and rallied fleets. "Today we stand unbroken. The Council's demand for submission is answered not with knees bent, but with resolve forged in fire. Medusa was our choice, mine, and it has secured our survival." The words tasted like lies. She claimed it publicly to shield the military, to own the burden as leader, but privately, and in the dim-lit antechamber after the broadcast cut, she crumpled. Reports flooded in. Mars took glancing hits from debris, comms silent on her daughter's colony. Maya confirmed KIA, her last transmission a ghost in the logs. Elise's hands trembled as she clutched the console, sobs choking out. Unbreakable. She was a mother, a politician dodging the blade, pushing the horror to Lena's deck. Now it was hers, and the weight crushed. Admiral Lena Rios paced the Reliance observation deck. The cheers from below decks, a distant hum, hailed as the architect, whispers of promotion, of statues on Luna. But the holotank replayed the pulse's arc, and she saw the truth. Humanity, in one stroke, had erased billions. Not just Veth's loyalists, but Arun's hopeful defectors. Their worlds warped into uninhabitable husks. She'd embraced total war. Her family's ghosts avenged. But at what mirror? The enemy she'd hated now reflected in Sol's defenses. Sensors pinged. Inbound signatures, alien remnants, Clethari survivors, Voran stragglers limping toward Earth. Supplicants seeking alliance in the hegemony's fall. Accusers, too, their transmissions laced with grief for the lost. Lena stared into the starfield, defiance earned but hollow. We'd saved our species, but become monsters to do it. Dr. Arun Patel sat alone in his lab. The Reliance hum, a funeral dirge. The pulse's echoes rolled in. Data streams from warped systems. Stars flickering erratically. FTL ghosts haunting the lanes. He catalogued it methodically. Orbital decays on Epsilon Indi, societal collapses in the fringes. His tweaks had saved a handful, the lead Clethari flotilla, a Varan outpost, but the many others, doomed. Guilt settled like radiation, permanent, his idealism shattered. He'd underestimated the ruthlessness, his own and the galaxy's. Humanity's debut wasn't a handshake, it was a fist that extinguished the room. Years later, as distorted council distress calls still ghosted into Sol, faint wails from fractured empires, a new alien envoy pierced the rebuilt pickets, not with weapons or ultimatums, but a single transmission, clear and probing, directed to Earth's leaders. Now that you have survived by delivering extinction, what will you demand of those who come next?